Okay, so the alpha version of Leaf MVC 4 was just released, and it comes with a bunch of new features, improvements, and a whole lot more. And today, we're going to explore everything, and we're going to build a really tiny app just to show what you can do with Leaf MVC 4 and what building with Leaf MVC 4 will look like when the final version is released. So let's get into it. So I'm just going to pull up my terminal, and we're going to use Composer to install the Leaf MVC 4 alpha. So we're using Composer because Leaf MVC 4 has not yet reached like a stable version, so we can't use the Leaf CLI to create an application yet. So with Composer, we just need to type in our Composer create project, and then we select the version, which is 4.0-alpha. So that's the first alpha for version 1. Hopefully we won't have any more. Yeah, so we give our project a name, and we just let that generate the project for us. Takes just a little bit, fresh dependencies, and great, it's done. Okay, so I'm just going to open this project up in VS Code, and then we can take a look at what this project is, what it looks like, what's included or what's not included. And then yeah, we can just start building our application from there. Okay, so this is what our project looks like. Reading all the files from the bottom up, we have our readme file, which is just Leaf generated for whatever your application is supposed to do, so you can leave a little description. You have the Leaf file, which is your console for Leaf MVC, so you can do commands like php leaf, do something. We'll look at that later. You have your git ignore to just not publish things which are not supposed to be published, and then your env file, which we'll be using in a little bit. Next, you have your public folder, which is mostly just used for publicly accessible stuff like your CSS files, your JavaScript, images. And then there's an index.php file in there, but then that's just used for initializing Leaf and all of that. So basically, you don't need to touch that file. You won't be working with it at all. So the only folder you actually be working with is your app folder. It contains all your MVC stuff, so like your models, views, controllers, and then your routes. There's an example route that just renders a view, which is the index.blade file here. This just has a welcome page, so there's not much going on over there. You also have your models, your database schema, create your database, and then your controllers. So that's pretty much what's in your application folder. So to actually run this project, we can use the php leaf serve. Whenever I type php leaf, it runs the Leaf file we saw earlier, and that just provides a bunch of commands for our Leaf MVC application. So php leaf serve, we open up our application, and we get this beautiful page, heavily inspired by you know who. Okay, so this page has a little description that tells us how to get started. So we can edit the app views index.blade.php file. So we can just copy that and then paste that in VS Code. We open up the file, and this is what we have. So it's just a Blade template. This is mostly just HTML stuff, but then we have a few Blade directives here and there. So we're just going to change this to like a hello, so we can see this is the actual page, and we get a little hello up there. Okay, so we're just going to bring this back. We don't really need to edit this right now. But yeah, this is what we have. This the default Leaf MVC 4 setup. So now we can start building an application. So what do we want to do? Technically, it should be some sort of note-taking app, and then it'll have like a login sign up, and probably a part where everyone can see all the notes on the platform. So to get started, we need to initialize our database using the database folder. Okay, so when we look inside our database folder, we see two files. a users and a password resets table, but then we don't really need a password reset here, so I'm just going to get rid of that. This is what you call a schema file. So comparing this to the previous version of Leaf MVC, you notice Leaf MVC 3 had factories, migrations, schemas, and seeds, but then all of these folders had files that had functions for a single database table. So an example is you would have a user seeder that just generated the dummy data for our users table. So you could put that in like this, or you could use a user factory. Now, calling a user factory would mean you need to open up the user factory file and then use faker or another method to generate just random data like this. Now, all of that can be done at once under the seeds key in the users.yml file. So this file contains our seeds, our database columns, and everything. And the really cool thing is there's no difference between seeds and factories with schema files because they basically do the same thing. It's all the same here. You can use a count key to generate an amount of dummy data, 10 to whatever. And then truncate shows whether you want to delete all of the data in that table before generating dummy data. So by default, it's false. You can set that to true or false, or just remove that if you don't need a truncate key. So in this case, we have our name, email, password, email verified at, and because we are setting remember token to true, remember token will also have a seed underneath. And then another really cool thing is in schema files, increments, so like increments, keys, IDs are done by default, so they are true. Timestamps are also true by default. So we create a created out field and an updated out field for you. If you don't need those, you can set that to false. For instance, timestamps false, and then you can have a created out field. So in this case, there'll be a created out field, no updated out field. But that's true by default. So if you don't specify it, Leaf will create both the created out and updated out fields for you. And then it's the same thing for increment. So increment will create an auto incrementing ID. But if you don't want that, you can set that to false and then set your own ID, in this case like a UUID. Basically, you can change anything you want to change. And that's a schema file for you. So everything is pretty much in the same place. You can view, edit, and all of that without having to browse through multiple files. So since this is a note-taking app, we need another table to house all of our notes. And since a schema file is tied to a database table, we need to create another schema file for our notes. So we can do this with our PHP leaf console command. We say PHP leaf g schema and then the name of our database table, which is notes. And then we get this file here. And what we want to do this time is to have a title field, a column, and then a note column. So title string, note text. And then every note is tied to a user, and we can specify that relationship under the relationships key. So what this does is it creates a user ID field, which is like a big integer. So basically we could have like a user ID field that way, or we can just set a relationship directly in the user model. So relationships is an array of models, and you don't have to add like the app model stuff. That's done for you. So you just pass in the model name. And then one last thing we want to do is to add seeds. So we can pass in our seeds like this. We need to specify a user ID because we want every node to be tied to a user. So we say user ID. Let's just set that to 1 because 1 would probably be the first user signed up. We are using auto incrementing IDs. So we can have a title here, And then for our title, we can use faker.sentence to just generate a random sentence for our note title. And then for our note itself, we can use a faker.paragraph. So to generate a paragraph for our note. So since we have timestamps on, Leaf will automatically generates a timestamp for our seeds for created at and updated at. So we don't need to do that ourselves. Leaf will handle all of that stuff for us. So basically, this is our notes.yml schema file. This is literally everything we need to do for our notes table. So we can just save this, and then now we can migrate our database. But before we migrate our database, we need to do one thing. We need to configure our database in our env file. So we can head over to our env file and then just pass in our database credentials. So let's do that real quick. Okay. So what we need to do here is check the kind of database we want to connect to. So Leaf supports MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, SQL Server, and a bunch of other databases. But in this case, we're going to use MySQL simply because I already have MySQL running. And then our database hosts, obviously localhost. But then for a production database, you can just actually put the database host there. Our database name, we're just going to name it My Notes app. And then the username is root with no password. Okay, so that's our database. And now one really cool thing about Leaf MVC 4 is we don't actually need to create our database first. So in Leaf MVC 3 and other frameworks, you would have to create your database first, have it running somewhere. Obviously, you need to do this for production databases because you might host your database on a different platform or something like that. But then with your local databases, you don't need to create them first, because whenever you run the migrate command, Leaf will check if the database exists first, and if it doesn't exist, Leaf will create it before actually running your migrations. So that's something you don't need to worry about. You can just head over, configure your database, add your schema files, and then migrate. And that's all you need to do. So now we run php leaf db migrate, and you can see the very first line here is verifying database. So it does that whenever you run your db migrate. It just checks if the database exists. So in this case, we didn't have our database already existing, so we created it and then ran our notes and our users migrations, and we see our new database there. So now we can click into it and we see our notes table and our users table. Our users table has all of the information we put over there, plus our ID and created at fields. Same thing for our notes. It has everything we specified in there. Our title, our note, and all of that stuff is in there. Plus our user ID, big int, just as expected. So our database is now set up. This is literally how simple it is to set up a database with Leaf MVC 4. So yeah, let's move on to the rest of our application. Now that we have our database, we can actually set up authentication. And Leaf provides a simple way to do that. We can use the php leaf scaffold auth command. This will first of all check if we have leaf auth installed. If we don't, it will install leaf auth as it just did here. It would scaffold a few things, a bunch of views, a bunch of controllers, a navbar, and all of that. And we can click on sign in. And I don't have an account yet, so nothing's going to happen. Going back to our database, we can see that's empty. So I'll just click on register, enter my name and a bunch of information, email, password, confirm password, and it comes with full validation and all of that stuff. So if my confirm password field is different from my password field, it will throw a little error just like this. And it does the same thing for emails if the email already exists and stuff like that. There are like different validation messages for all of that. So I'm just going to enter some real information here. And oops. So that error popped up because we are using cached results of our env. So we actually started our server before we updated our env file. So we need to just restart our server and then we can sign up again, and this time we'll get logged in. So this is a little dashboard Leaf generates for you as part of the whole authentication flow. And then back in our database, we see the new user has actually been created. So we have our user, we have our email, hashed passwords, we have our created, our updated, our filled by Leaf, everything working just as expected. Okay, so what do we want the application to look like? Basically be something like a Substack where you can just post notes and everyone can see your notes. Very, very, very simple. So yeah, let's get to that. So first of all, we're going to clear all of this stuff here. We don't need our stats, we don't need our table. So let's speed run that. All of the views for our authentication flow, everything generated by authentication flow is in the app views pages/auth, and our dashboard page is a home.blade.php page. So we can just open that up. Okay, so we're getting rid of everything in the home.blade.php file, and then we'll just put a little hello here. But then let's style that with like Tailwind, BG yellow, maybe on 800, and then we'll just put our hello back there. But then we don't see anything, right? That's because we actually don't have Tailwind installed. All of what you're seeing here is an already built version of Tailwind. Tailwind removes all classes you don't use, so we need to actually install Tailwind into our application because that's what we're going to be using to style our front end. And Leaf comes to our rescue. Leaf has a really simple way to set up Tailwind for us. We can PHP Leaf view install --tailwind, and then that will install our Tailwind, Vite, and then all of our front-end dependencies. And then when that's done, it will set up all of our back-end dependencies to the Leaf Vite module for our server-side communication with the front end and all of that stuff. All of that is going to be set up for you, and that's it. Tailwind is now installed. So we have Tailwind now, but then we need to make a few changes to the way we are loading our styling. So the original styling here uses our assets, our public assets. So we have a compiled version of Tailwind that only has the styling we need. So we need to replace that with the styling that we just installed from Tailwind. So you can see our node modules there. Okay, so assets CSS, that's what we have here. We are going to replace that with our Vite CSS/app CSS. So that can be found inside the views folder, css/app.css. So we're just going to do this for all of our layouts. So these are dashboard layouts. You can see our sidebar links and all of that. We're also going to replace the Vite styling here, and then finally do the same thing for our index file. Actually, we don't need to do this because we're not going to touch this file. But yeah, let's just do that anyway. So same thing here. Now this will allow us to use Vite. So CSS, JS, anything we need to load from Vite can be done. So we reload and we get a little error here again. So Vite manifest not found. So now what's happening is we don't have a Vite server running. So usually you have two servers running. One is your Vite server, which bundles all your front-end assets, your CSS, your JavaScript, all of that stuff. But now, since we don't have our Vite server running, Leaf doesn't know where to access them, how to find them, anything like that. So we can fix this by running a Vite server. How do we do that? Simple. Just stop your PHP server and then restart it. Whenever Leaf detects the presence of Vite, it will automatically start two servers, one for PHP and then one for Vite. So you don't need to do anything. You just need to restart your server. And basically that's it. So you can see two application URLs, one for your Leaf application and then one for the Vite server. But you don't need to do anything from there. Just go back to your browser, refresh, and we have everything working correctly. We can change this to like 300 and that's it. So everything is working fine. So we can proceed with building the rest of our application. we're just going to build like this little banner. That's what's on your mind. You click on that, and then that's what takes you to the create view. So basically, we have this in the end. It's just a banner that has what's on your mind with a user's name, and then we have a little profile picture thingy, but we don't actually have profile pictures, so it's kind of like an avatar with the user's name, first letter of their name in there, and it looks like this. So next, we are going to remove our sidebar. Once again, we're keeping the little profile thingy, which is inside the sidebar. For that, we can head over to our layout/dashboard.blade.php file and just start deleting stuff. Let's go. So first of all, we don't need the sidebar links. We just get rid of them. We don't need this. Delete. Delete. Okay, so now this is what we have in the end. But then we need to find somewhere to place our profile part. Maybe let's just have like a floating button. That's not something you'd see on other websites, but hey, come on, we're just having fun with this. So we can just make that fixed, give it a bottom and right spacing, just to put it in our bottom right corner, and let it float over all of our content. Okay, so one more thing I'd like to do is make our application service area like much smaller. Let's just keep it somewhere small in the middle, maybe like 7XL. No, that's too much. Maybe 6XL, 5XL. Okay, yeah, we're going with this. So this is perfect. Okay, so now we need to create a list for our notes. We need to create a list of notes, and we're going to keep this stupid simple. So basically just a card that has a title, and then it has the actual notes content. I'm going to speed run this section too, so keep up. So basically we have this. We have a very simple card. It has the user's image, the note title, note description. So we can just duplicate this a few times just to see what our finished application will look like. Okay, not bad, not bad. Okay, so now what we want to do is to actually hook this up to our dashboard controller, because that's what's actually rendering our view. Basically, we'll be getting our data from our model, which is basically our database layer, and then we'll be pushing that data into our view. And I just noticed we don't have a note model, so we need to create a model for notes, and we can do that using the PHP Leaf console again. So now that we have our notes model, we will want to get all notes. So then we can say notes equals note, our note model. So we basically just need to import that. So we import it, and then we can say note all, and then that would give us all notes. We would want to get a note together with the user who created a note. So a simple way to do this would be to just head over to our notes and then just create a relation with our user model. So we can just say public function user, and then this would be a situation where a user can have many nodes, and then a single node belongs to a user. Okay, so now we need to change this note all to notes with our user, because that's kind of like what we have. And then we want to grab all of the nodes with the users. So basically get all nodes, but then with the users. And then now that we have this in our nodes variable, we just pass that into our nodes, into our view. And then let's see. All right. this should be get, not all. So let's just quickly change that. Okay, and there we go. So now what we need to do is let's create an empty state for our notes. So just in case the user, just in case there are actually no notes at all. So not just the user, just in case there are no notes on the platform, we show an empty state. So let's do something like that. So now that we have the notes variable, we actually have the notes variable. We can check if the notes actually contain something, and then we can do that with notes.count. So if not notes.count, then that means there are no notes at the moment. So we can just have our empty state over there. So it's basically just going to be like a little card, and then who knows, we might have like an image and then a little text underneath, like no notes found. Just something a little bit nice, not too fancy, but then definitely not looking weird either. So yeah, something like this, with our image on top. But then what we want to do now that we already have a user is we want to generate fake notes using our seeds, which we talked about earlier. So to do that, we can head over to our database folder and then open up our notes.yml file. And basically we've already configured everything we need to configure. So let's give this a run. And the way we do this is, once again, we use PHP Leaf. And this time we say db seed notes. And that's it. So we generated 5 items. We have all of that in our database now. So let's go back to application. Let's refresh. And our empty state is gone. So everything looks good. Looks like everything is working fine. But now we want to actually display the notes. So we can head back to our file and then just loop through this array of notes that we are supposedly getting. So instead of auth user as we did over here, we can just change that to note user name, because we specified that we wanted to get all the notes together with the users. So everything will have like a notes.user field, just because we added that width on the model. We save this and there we go. So I'm just going to sign out of this user, create a new user so that we can have multiple users on our application. So that works beautifully. We have our new user created. And okay, we want to have a little distinction between the currently logged in user and the user who actually posted a note. So for this, we can just change the UI a little bit. Not a big change. We can just change the color of the user avatar based on whether it's a user who is currently logged in or it's a different user. So over here we have the light red for the user who is currently logged in, so that matches here. And then we can have the blue for the user who posted it if it isn't the currently logged in user. So one more thing we want to do is we want to generate notes for the user we just created. So we need to go back to our notes.yml file, and then this time we change the user ID to 2. We can also change the count to maybe 2. We run our seed command again. Nice. Oh wait, okay. So this was unexpected, but then this is what we actually told Leaf to do. So back in our notes.yml file, you can see we actually left truncate to true. And remember what truncate does? It actually clears everything in the database table before running the seeds. So in order to make this work, we need to remove truncate. So we remove truncate, and then we can generate more notes for the other user. So we do that, and then the notes are back in here. And oops, we are not getting the red notes. Let's just quickly fix that. We can just replace all of this. When we click on this, what's on your mind, currently it doesn't do anything. It's just an empty route. But then we would want it to display the form. So what we need to do is we need to create a route and a view for notes create. I'll start off with a view. Once again, we can use PHP Leaf, this time with a gview command to generate a view. We'll name this one pages/notes/create. So we are kind of nesting this one. Yeah. And then we just generate that page. So it creates a pages notes create.blade.php file. And then in there we can have our form. So let's just speedrun form. We copy our dashboard view so we have the same layout. And then we can just change the name, add a few things here and there. And then we need to create our route. So in Leaf MVC, we use route partials to create routes. Technically, you can put all your routes in a single route partial and it doesn't matter. But then route partials are just ways to, they're just a way to group up your routes in a way that they are clean and easy to understand. So for instance, if you take the _auth.php route partial, you know it contains all of your authentication routes. So you can just create a new one for notes. So we'll name that _notes. And then the really cool thing is in your routes folder, everything with underscore is automatically loaded by Leaf. So then we don't need to register anything anywhere. We don't need to do any fancy footwork. We just create _notes.php and then that's it. We can add our routes in there. Okay, so the way routing works with Leaf, we call the app function, which just returns our Leaf instance. And then we can call get post depending on what kind of route we want to handle. So we say app get in this case, and then we say /notes/create. And then the second parameter is our route handler. So it could be a function, it could be a controller. Since we're using MVC, we'll want to use a controller in this particular case. So we say notes controller at create. So basically we are calling a notes controller class with a create function. Okay. And then now we don't have a notes controller, so we want to generate a notes controller. Once again, PHP Leaf. So we g controller notes, and then it creates a notes controller for us. And the name of the function that will handle this route is create, because we set notes controller at create. So we just change this index to a create, and then we load in the name of the route we want, and there we go. So now we have our new note hello, but then we want this to actually display a form. So we're going to speed run this form. Okay, so this is our form. We have a title and we have a note. Basically, that's all we need from our note. So we can type in our title, we can add the actual note body, stuff like that. Okay, so we can't really submit this because we don't have any handler for it. So we need to create one. And basically the handler for this, which we'll call our store function. So once again, in our notes controller, we create a store function, a store method. And basically what's going to happen here is we can take this in a few steps. First of all, we get the data that's coming from our form. Once we have that data, I mean, you might want to validate it. In this case, we're just going to skip that. But then you usually want to validate every single bit of data coming into your app. If it's coming from a user, validate it. Users usually do everything possible to break your application. So if there's any piece of information you're getting from a user, please validate it. Okay. Since we are not validating that information, we are going to just put that into our database. So I guess that's only 2 steps. So now what we do is we would want to note create something like this, and then when we are done, we redirect to maybe dashboard, because the dashboard page is what shows all of our notes basically. So we want to redirect to that page, but then we are adding a flash message. So basically flash messages are just session based messages that show only once. So they are displayed once and then they are erased from the session. So Leaf Blade has this really cool toast thingy already set up for you. So if you want to display a toast to a Leaf Blade, all you need to do is have this leaf.toast field and then basically just pass in whatever you want to display. So in this case, we are passing a success toast with the message note created. So if there's any page you want to display that toast on, you just put a toast container and then Leaf will take care of the rest. One more thing we need to do is we need to create the route to actually handle the request. So there's going to be a post. So only post requests will be allowed to access this route. And then it will go to notes controller at store, which is what we just created. Now we need to make sure our form says the same thing. So form action would be notes, method would be post, and that's pretty much it. Okay. One more thing is, since we are using the model create function, so we need to make sure we can actually mass assign values. So we say protected fillable and then everything we want to mass assign, which is title and note. So we do that. And oh yeah, we need to actually tie every note to a user ID. Okay. So the way we do this is we need to replace our note model here with our user model. And remember, we are talking about how one user can have many notes. So basically, a really simple way to do this is user find, and then with relation to notes, we create that note. So basically, that will tie that note to the user automatically. And basically, we just need to create this notes function inside of our user model. So what that looks like is we add a note. We have many because a user can have many notes. So basically, that's it. So we can go back to our application. It works, but then we have to scroll down to actually see our notes, which is usually not what you want. You want the latest stuff to be at the top. And we can quickly fix this by going to our dashboard controller and we check our note with user. We can add a little condition to this where we want to order by a field. So we say order by descending. So we want to get the latest items first. And then we save, go back to application and refresh, and that's exactly what happens. So basically, we can create notes, we can view notes, and then we know which notes are for us, which notes are for other users. We want to tell the user when this note was created. We can do this by using the Leaf date module. So basically, we just need to use the Leaf CLI. We say Leaf install date, and then that's it. So we can go back to our home.blade.php file. So we just create a new small. When was the last time you used a small tag? So leaf date has this tick function, which is something you can call from anywhere in your application. So we say tick, and then we pass in the date of the current note. So we say notes created at to get the actual time it was created. We want to get how long ago the note was created. So we can use from now. And we get this. So 1 minute ago, 34 minutes ago, blah, blah, blah. And this is working beautifully. So basically, that's all we need to do. We can add a few more notes just to test things out. So let's just add another note. Let's test this out. This is a test. And then we get less than a minute ago. So that's it. Let's try our other user. We sign in with our other user. You see the little validation going on there. So all of that has already been set up for you. So we are logged in now. Let's check this out. We create a new note, and less than a minute ago, 4 minutes ago, 37 minutes ago. So everything is working beautifully. So this is just a simple application. The whole idea is to give you a fair idea of what building with Leaf MVC 4 looks like. All of the tiny niceties which have been improved from version 3. How the Leaf console just makes things a whole lot easier for you. It actually sets things up for you so you don't need to do them yourself. There's a bunch of new features like the revamped view engine layer, and then schema files, and a few tiny features. So we just need to get a lot of feedback from you. Try it out in your tiny projects. Let us know how it goes. Leave a like, a comment, share Leaf with your friends, subscribe, and all of that stuff. I'll catch you in the next vid, guys. Take care.